He still remembers the sound of Chloe coughing in the hallway that night. Then, tired, it was past midnight, and he was sitting at the kitchen table with invoices spread out in front of him, trying to make numbers stretch where they wouldn't. The apartment smelled like the soup he burned earlier. His phone buzzed across the table. Her name on the screen. Victoria. He let it ring twice. 3 times. He shouldn't have answered. Not at that hour. Not with his life balanced so carefully. But he did. And when her voice came through steady low, nothing like the boardroom tone, something shifted in him. Not excitement, not hope, something heavier. Because he knew, even then, that one wrong step wouldn't just cost him a job, it would cost Chloe everything he'd fought to keep stable. He kept the lights off in the kitchen after the call ended. The phone was still in his hand. Screen dark now. His reflection faint in it. He stayed there for a while, elbow on the table, thumb pressed against the edge like he might dial her back. He didn't. From the hallway, Chloe coughed again. Softer this time. He stood up immediately. That part of him never hesitated. Her door was cracked open. The small nightlight shaped like a moon cast a dull glow across her blankets. She had kicked them down in her sleep. One leg bare, hair stuck to her cheek. He pulled the blanket back over her slowly, careful not to wake her. Her skin felt warm but not feverish. He let his hand rest there a second longer than necessary, just making sure she was still here, still safe. He closed her door almost fully. Not all the way. Never all the way. Back in the kitchen, the silence felt different now. Thicker. Victoria had called to talk about numbers at first. A client account that had slipped the review. A mistake that would cost the company more than anyone wanted to admit. He was good at those conversations. Clean. Efficient. Detached. But somewhere between projections and damage control, she stopped sounding like his CEO. She asked if he was still at the office. He told her no. There was a pause. Long day? She'd asked. It wasn't the kind of question she usually asked. He had almost lied. Said no. Said it was fine. Instead, he looked at the stack of unpaid bills on the table and said, "Yeah." Another pause. Not awkward. Just quiet. Then she said, softer, "You don't have to carry everything alone, Daniel." That was the moment he should have redirected the conversation. He didn't. He told himself later that it was exhaustion. That people say things at midnight they wouldn't say at noon. That nothing actually happened. But something had. The next morning, he arrived at work earlier than usual. He always did, but that day it felt deliberate. He wanted to anchor himself in routine. The office lobby smelled like polished stone and coffee. The security guard nodded at him, same as always. Upstairs, the lights were still dimmed in most of the building. He liked that hour. No voices yet. No movement. He reviewed the client file Victoria had mentioned. The numbers were worse than he expected. He lost himself in corrections, in spreadsheets, in the quiet hum of the air system. It steadied him. By the time others started arriving, his expression was neutral again. Controlled. He avoided looking toward the executive corridor longer than necessary. At 10, he had to. A department head meeting. Victoria was already there when he walked in. Hair pulled back, navy suit. Nothing in her posture suggested she had called him after midnight. If anyone had walked in on that phone call, they would have assumed it was professional. It had started that way. He took his seat 2 chairs down from her. Far enough. She didn't look at him right away. She never singled him out in meetings. If anything, she was harder on him than the others. Expected more. Halfway through the presentation, she asked for his input on the client recovery plan. His voice didn't shake. He laid out the adjustments calmly. Step by step. She nodded once. "That'll work," she said. "Just that. No softness. No trace." And yet, when the meeting ended and everyone began gathering their laptops, she leaned slightly toward him. "Stay back a minute," she said quietly. His chest tightened. Not visibly. Just enough. The room cleared. The door shut. She walked to the window instead of facing him directly, hands clasped behind her back. "I didn't mean to overstep last night," she said. He didn't answer immediately. He studied the edge of the conference table instead. You didn't, he replied. She turned then, searching his face for something. He kept it unreadable. I value your work, she continued, and your judgment. I don't want to blur lines. There it was. The line. He nodded. Understood. Silence stretched between them. Professional. Controlled. Then she added, but I also don't want to pretend we're not human. That landed differently. He felt it low in his stomach. Not desire. Not yet. Recognition. He forced himself to meet her eyes. They were steady. Not flirtatious. Not careless. Just honest. He thought about Chloe at home, about the custody agreement signed 2 years ago, about how fragile stability had felt even then. He thought about office politics, about how quickly perception turns. I can handle the client, he said instead. It wasn't an answer to what she'd said, but it was the safest response he had. She held his gaze for a second longer. Then she nodded once. All right. The conversation ended there. He left the room first. The rest of the day moved in its usual rhythm. Emails, calls, reviews, a vendor dispute, a performance evaluation. Normal. He kept his interactions with her brief. Measured. Necessary. But awareness lingered. At 6, as he packed up to leave, he saw her reflection in the glass wall of his office before he heard the knock. Got a minute? She asked. He almost said no. Instead, he stepped back to let her in. She didn't sit, just stood near the doorway. There's a fundraiser tonight, she said. Last-minute attendance issue. I need someone I trust there. He understood immediately what that meant. Public event. High-profile donors. Press sometimes. Why me? He asked. Because you don't perform, she replied. He frowned slightly. You listen, you think before you speak. People underestimate that. He shouldn't have felt that small spark of something at the words, but he did. He glanced at his watch. I have my daughter. She nodded. Of course. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. He hesitated. Chloe's cough echoed in his mind. The bills on the table, the fact that visibility in the company wasn't always a bad thing. I need to arrange a sitter, he said slowly. That's fair. She didn't push. That almost made it worse. After she left, he stood still for a moment, the office around him buzzing with end-of-day movement. He pulled out his phone. Texted Mrs. Alvarez downstairs. Are you free tonight? 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Yes, my Joe. What time? He stared at the message longer than necessary. 8 until late, he typed back. When he finally locked his office door and headed toward the elevator, he felt something building, not excitement. Pressure. He told himself it was just work, just one event, just professional. But as the elevator doors closed and his reflection stared back at him again, he knew he was already stepping onto something that didn't have clear edges. And he had never been careless with Chloe's future. Not once. Chloe was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor when he got home, her coloring book spread out in front of her. Crayons everywhere. She looked up when the door opened. You're late, she said, not accusing. Just noticing. Yeah. He crouched down, brushed a hand over her hair. Sorry. Her cough had eased. That helped. He moved through the small apartment quickly, checked the thermostat, touched her forehead again, opened the window just a crack to let fresh air in. He didn't tell her about the event yet. He didn't know how to say it without it sounding like something bigger than it was. Mrs. Alvarez arrived 10 minutes later, wrapped in her long gray sweater. She smelled faintly of lavender and onions. Chloe liked her. That mattered. You be good for her, he told Chloe. She narrowed her eyes at him. Where are you going? Work thing. She studied his suit jacket laid across the chair. Fancy work thing. He almost smiled. A little. She considered that. Then nodded once. Okay, but don't be late. That word sat heavier than it should have. He drove downtown with the windows up and the radio off. Traffic lights flickered against the windshield. He kept both hands on the steering wheel, tighter than usual. He could still back out. Claim something came up. Send apologies. But he didn't. The venue was glass and steel. Clean lines. Too bright. Valets moved quickly in neat uniforms. Inside, the air was cooler than outside, scented faintly with expensive perfume and polished wood. He spotted her near the entrance before she saw him. Victoria stood alone for a moment, scanning the room the way she did before stepping into negotiations. Not nervous. Assessing. She wore black. Simple. No jewelry except small earrings. Her hair was down tonight. That caught him off guard. When she noticed him approaching, something in her expression shifted. Not a smile exactly, just recognition. "Thank you for coming," she said. He nodded. "Where do you need me?" She handed him a program. Their fingers brushed. He felt it. Brief. Accidental. He stepped back slightly, grounding himself. The first hour passed in polite conversation. Investors. Board members. A city councilman who liked to talk too much. Daniel listened more than he spoke, just as she'd said he would. When he did speak, people leaned in. He noticed the way Victoria watched that. Not with pride, with relief. At one point, a donor asked how long he had been with the company. 5 years, he said, and rising quickly, the donor added, glancing between him and Victoria. There it was. The first flicker of implication. Victoria's tone stayed even. He's earned every promotion. Daniel shifted the conversation back to the foundation's work. Clean redirect. No edge. Still, he felt it settle under his skin. Later, as the room thinned and the music softened, they stepped out onto the terrace for air. City lights stretched below them. Traffic like moving veins. The noise muted up there. She leaned lightly against the railing. He stayed a step back. "You were right," she said. "About what?" "People underestimate you." He exhaled slowly. "It works in my favor." She looked at him then. "Direct. And against you." He didn't answer immediately. He thought about Chloe's small hand gripping his when they crossed the street, about courtrooms and paperwork and promises made to a frightened 6-year-old that things would stay steady. "I don't take risks I can't afford," he said finally. Her gaze softened. Not pity, something else. "Neither do I," she replied. The wind lifted a strand of her hair. He noticed a faint line at the corner of her eye when she squinted against it. He hadn't seen that before. They stood there without speaking for a long moment. Not awkward. Just aware. He should have stepped back inside first. He didn't. "Why me?" he asked quietly. She didn't pretend not to understand. "Because you don't want anything from me," she said. That caught him off guard. "I want my job," he answered. "And you're good at it." She held his eyes. "But you don't orbit me like the others. You don't flatter. You disagree when you need to." He swallowed. "That's called doing the work. It's rare." Silence again. Below them, a car horn blared briefly, then faded. He felt the shift coming before it happened. The line thinning. The air tightening. "I have a daughter," he said suddenly. Her expression changed, alert, careful. "I know. She comes first. I would expect that." He studied her face for any sign of impatience. There wasn't any. "My ex already thinks I prioritize work too much," he continued. "If anything looks inappropriate." He let the sentence trail. Victoria straightened slightly. "Nothing inappropriate has happened." "No." "Daniel." Her voice lowered. "If this makes you uncomfortable, we stop. Completely." The word completely hung there. He tried to picture that. Returning to strict professionalism. Erasing the midnight call. The terrace. He imagined walking into meetings and feeling nothing. It didn't feel honest. "I'm not uncomfortable," he said. That was the truth. The problem was he wasn't indifferent either. She stepped closer, not touching. Just closing the space enough that he could see the faint rise and fall of her breathing. "I don't make impulsive decisions," she said quietly, "but I also don't ignore something that feels real." The word real made his chest tighten. He had spent years narrowing his world. Work. Chloe. Routine. Predictability. Real felt dangerous. From inside, someone called her name. The moment cracked. She stepped back first this time. "We should go in," she said. He nodded. They returned to the room separately. He made sure of that. The rest of the night blurred slightly. More handshakes. A brief speech. Applause. When it finally ended, they stood near the exit as guests filtered out. "Thank you," she said again. "You don't need to keep saying that." "I know." He hesitated before adding, "This doesn't change anything." Her eyes held his. "No," she agreed. "It doesn't." But neither of them believed that fully. He drove home faster than he should have. Mrs. Alvarez was half asleep on the couch when he walked in. Chloe was already in bed. He thanked Mrs. Alvarez quietly and walked her to the door. Then he stood in Chloe's doorway again. She was curled on her side, breathing steady. He knelt beside her bed and rested his forearm on the mattress. He replayed the terrace in his mind, the space between them, the honesty. He felt something unfamiliar pressing against his careful life. Not chaos, possibility, and that frightened him more than anything had in a long time. Because possibility meant choice, and choice meant responsibility for whatever followed. He stayed there until his legs went numb. Then he turned off the hallway light and went to bed without checking his phone. He didn't want to see if she had texted. He didn't want proof that the line had already shifted. Monday mornings had a rhythm he depended on. Coffee at 6:10, Chloe's hair braided by 6:10:25, backpack zipped, permission slip signed. The walk to school took exactly 7 minutes if she didn't stop to inspect every crack in the sidewalk. That morning she stopped twice. He didn't rush her. Her cough was gone. She swung his hand back and forth as they waited at the crosswalk. "Are you tired?" she asked suddenly. He looked down at her. "Why? You look like when you read grown-up papers." He almost laughed. "Almost. I'm fine." She didn't argue, just nodded like she was storing the information somewhere. When he dropped her off, she hugged him longer than usual, arms tight around his waist. "Don't be late," she said again. "I won't." He meant it. At work, nothing looked different. That was the strange part. Same elevator hum. Same muted, carpeted hallways. Same scent of printer toner and cologne. But he felt slightly out of step with it, like he had returned from somewhere and hadn't fully landed. Victoria was already in her office when he arrived. The door half open. She was on a call. Voice firm, precise. No trace of the terrace. He kept walking. By 10, whispers had started. Not loud, not direct. Just glances that lingered a second too long. A joke from accounting about him rubbing shoulders with the top tier. A raised eyebrow from Marcus in operations. He kept his expression neutral. At lunch, he ate at his desk instead of the cafeteria. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Meeting moved to 3. Conference B. Nothing else. Professional. He exhaled slowly. The 3 p.m. meeting was crowded. 2 board members present. A compliance officer dialed in remotely. It ran long. Tense discussion about restructuring one of their divisions. At one point, he disagreed with her publicly. Not sharply, just firmly. The room went quiet. Victoria held his gaze, weighing the argument. Then she nodded. "We'll review that model instead." The meeting resumed, but the air felt charged afterward. As people filed out, he heard someone murmur behind him, "Bold move." He ignored it. Victoria didn't ask him to stay back this time. He returned to his office, closed the door, and let himself sit heavily for a moment. His heart was beating too fast for something that small. He wasn't worried about her reaction. He was worried about perception. An hour later, his phone rang. Not her. His ex. He stared at the screen before answering. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately. "Nothing's wrong," she replied, tone already edged. "Can't I call?" He leaned back in his chair. "You usually don't." A pause. "I heard something interesting," she said. His stomach tightened. "Oh? Someone from your company was at the fundraiser Saturday. Apparently you were very visible." He closed his eyes briefly. "And?" And, she continued, I hope you remember we have a custody agreement, stability, professional environment, no scandals. There's no scandal, he said evenly. Just making sure. He kept his voice steady. Chloe is fine, that hasn't changed. See that it doesn't. The call ended. He sat there for a long time after. His hands were cold. This was exactly what he had feared. Not because anything had happened, but because it didn't matter. Stories didn't need facts to grow. He worked late that evening. Deliberately. He wanted the building nearly empty before he left. When he finally stepped into the executive corridor to drop off a finalized report, her door was open. She was alone. Their eyes met. He stepped inside and placed the folder on her desk. She noticed his tension immediately. What happened? He hesitated. My ex called. Her expression sharpened. About? The fundraiser. Someone talked. Her jaw tightened slightly. Not anger. Calculation. I'm sorry, she said. It's not your fault, but it's connected to me. He looked at the city through her window, the sky already dark. I can't give her ammunition, he said quietly. Victoria stood slowly, walked around her desk. I would never put your daughter at risk. He believed her. That wasn't the problem. Intent doesn't matter in court, he replied. They stood facing each other in the quiet office. No more events, she said after a moment. No more visible appearances together outside necessity. The words landed heavier than he expected. He nodded. That's best. Silence. He should have left then. Instead, he asked, Do you regret Saturday? The question surprised both of them. She didn't answer immediately. No, she said finally. Do you? He thought about the terrace. The honesty, the recognition. He thought about Chloe's hug that morning. Yes, he said. It wasn't fully true. But it was safer. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something in her posture did, a slight retreat. I understand, she said. He picked up the empty folder and walked toward the door. Daniel, she called softly. He stopped. We'll be careful. He nodded without turning back. Careful. He had built his entire adult life around that word. Yet that night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he realized careful didn't mean untouched. Something had already shifted, and pretending otherwise was starting to feel like another kind of risk. The shift wasn't loud. That's what unsettled him most. There was no dramatic confrontation, no accusation in the hallway, just a change in temperature. Conversations that stopped when he approached, a new politeness from people who had once been casual. He responded the only way he knew how. He became better. Reports earlier. Meetings tighter. No wasted words. If anyone had been watching for favoritism, they would have found none. If anything, Victoria challenged him more openly now. He accepted it without flinching. But small things carried weight. She stopped by his office less. Emails became formal. No texts. It should have eased him. It didn't. One afternoon he saw her through the glass wall of the conference room, laughing at something Marcus said. Head tilted slightly back. Relaxed. He felt something low and sharp in his chest. Not jealousy exactly. Absence. He looked away immediately, irritated with himself. This was exactly what he had warned against. Emotional drift. The kind that clouds judgment. He forced his focus back to the document in front of him. At 5, his phone buzzed again. His ex. He let it ring twice before answering. What now? She mentioned you were distracted during pickup, she said. He frowned. Who? Chloe. His jaw tightened. What did she say? That you were quiet, that you kept checking your phone. He closed his eyes briefly. I wasn't checking my phone. Silence on the other end. Then measured. Daniel, I'm filing for a custody review. The words didn't register at first. For what? He asked flatly. Changed circumstances, increased professional exposure, potential instability. He stood up so abruptly, his chair rolled back into the wall. There is no instability. That's for the court to decide. He felt heat rising under his collar. You don't get to use my job as a weapon. You chose the job. The call ended. He stood in his office, breathing hard. The walls felt too close. He left immediately. Didn't say goodbye to anyone. The drive home was a blur of red lights and restrained anger. His grip on the steering wheel left his knuckles pale. When he walked into the apartment, Chloe was at the table drawing again. She looked up. "You're early." He forced his voice steady. "Yeah." He knelt in front of her. "Did you tell Mom I was distracted?" She tilted her head. "You were thinking?" "That's not distracted." She shrugged. "You looked far away." The honesty of it hit harder than any accusation. He swallowed. "I'm here," he said softly. She studied him like she wasn't entirely convinced. That night, after she went to bed, he sat at the kitchen table again. The same spot as the midnight call, only this time there were legal documents pulled up on his laptop screen. He reread the custody agreement line by line. Stability, moral environment, public conduct. His phone lit up. Victoria. He stared at it. He almost ignored it. But he answered. "Hi." Her voice was quieter than usual. "You left early." "Yes." A pause. "Is it worse than whispers?" He exhaled slowly. "She's filing for review." Silence on the other end. "I'm sorry," she said. He rubbed his forehead. "You didn't file it." "No. But I exist in the equation." He couldn't argue with that. "Daniel," she continued, "if stepping back completely protects you, we do that." There it was again. Completely. He felt something twist inside him. "You think that'll stop it?" he asked. "No," she admitted. "But it removes doubt." He leaned back in his chair. The ceiling light flickered faintly. "I don't regret Saturday," she said suddenly. He closed his eyes. "I know. But I won't let it cost you your daughter." His throat tightened unexpectedly. Chloe shifted in her room down the hall. A soft sound. He listened until her breathing evened out again. "I need time," he said. "You have it." After they hung up, he didn't move for a long while. He thought about the careful life he had built. Every choice weighed, every risk calculated, and yet here he was, facing a fight not because he had been reckless, but because he had allowed himself to feel something. The custody review moved quickly. Lawyers called. Emails flew. Dates were set. At work he remained composed. At home he watched Chloe more closely than ever. Asked about school, listened longer. One evening, while they washed dishes together, she said, "Are you mad?" "No." "You look like when you don't sleep." He dried his hands slowly. "I'm handling something," he said. She nodded, accepting that in the way children do when they know there's more but won't push. "Is it about the lady from your phone?" she asked casually. His hand stilled. "What lady?" "The one who called at night." His chest tightened. He hadn't realized she'd been awake that night. "It was work," he said carefully. Chloe didn't look up from the dish she was rinsing. "Okay." But the word felt fragile. Later, after she was asleep, he stood in the hallway again. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator. He understood something then. This wasn't just about perception. It was about presence. If he let himself drift even internally, Chloe would feel it. And he could not afford distance from her. Not emotional. Not physical. The next morning, he requested a meeting with Victoria. Private. When he stepped into her office, she already seemed to know. "You've decided," she said. He nodded once. "For now, we keep this strictly professional." She held his gaze. "For now," she repeated. It wasn't relief he felt. It was loss. Controlled. Necessary. But real. She extended her hand, a formal gesture. He looked at it for half a second before taking it. Her grip was steady. "No lingering. No special treatment," she said. "None," he agreed. They released. As he walked out, the hallway felt colder than usual. He told himself he had made the right choice. For Chloe. For stability. for the future. But that night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling again, he felt the quiet ache of something unfinished. And he understood that stepping back didn't erase what had already taken root. It just buried it deeper. The letter arrived on a Thursday. Plain envelope. His name typed cleanly across the front. No return address he recognized. He stood in the kitchen holding it longer than necessary. Chloe was in the living room building something out of cardboard and tape. She kept calling it a rocket, though it looked more like a crooked mailbox. He slid a finger under the seal. Petition for custody modification. The words were dense, formal, cold. He read it once. Then again slower. Allegations of instability. Questionable professional associations. Exposure to inappropriate workplace dynamics. He felt his jaw tighten. Chloe's voice drifted in from the living room. "Dad, look." He folded the papers neatly before stepping out. She was crouched beside the cardboard structure, cheeks flushed. "It has windows now." He knelt down beside her. "It's solid," he said, pressing lightly against one side. It wobbled. She frowned. "I need more tape." He reached for the roll and handed it to her. Their fingers brushed. Small, warm. She didn't know what that envelope meant. He intended to keep it that way. Later that night, after she was asleep, he called his attorney. "This is thin," the attorney said after reviewing the petition. "But thin claims can still cause noise." "I can't afford noise," Daniel replied. "Then we prepare. We show stability, routine, clean record." Daniel stared at the stack of dishes he hadn't washed yet. The small shoes by the door. The chore chart taped to the fridge. "I have that," he said. "Good, because the court will look closely, especially if there's any suggestion of workplace relationships." There it was again. Suggestion. "Nothing inappropriate has happened," Daniel said. "That's not always the standard. Perception matters." He ended the call feeling steadier and more unsettled at the same time. The next day at work, he moved like usual. Calm, focused. Victoria kept her distance. Meetings were efficient, emails crisp, but there was something in her eyes now, a watchfulness. Near noon, she sent him a short message. "Walk with me." Now. He met her in the hallway outside the executive wing. They didn't speak until they were inside the stairwell. The door closed with a muted thud. The air smelled faintly of concrete and dust. "Your attorney called mine," she said quietly. He nodded. "I needed to know the extent," she continued. "If my position complicates this, I need to understand how." "It complicates it," he said plainly. She absorbed that without flinching. "Then we reduce visibility further." "It's already reduced." She stepped closer, not touching, but near enough that he could see the faint tension in her jaw. "I can issue a formal memo," she said, clarifying reporting lines, creating distance structurally. He hesitated. "That makes it official," he replied. "Draws more attention." Silence settled between them. The stairwell felt too narrow. "I won't let you fight this alone," she said. His response came quickly. "You can't fight it for me. I can support you." He looked away, toward the small wire window that showed a slice of gray sky. "If this escalates," he said slowly, "they'll look into everything. Calls, appearances, timing." Her face remained composed, but he saw the flicker of understanding. "You're asking me to disappear," she said. The words weren't accusing. He swallowed. "I'm asking for space." A beat passed. "I can do that," she replied. That was the moment he felt the cost. Not dramatic, not loud, just a quiet tightening in his chest. When they returned to their separate floors, he didn't look back. The custody review process moved faster than he expected. Home visits were scheduled. Interviews requested. He scrubbed the apartment the night before the first evaluation. Not because it was dirty, but because he needed control over something. Chloe watched him wipe down already clean counters. "Are we having company?" she asked. "Yes. Do I need to wear a dress?" He paused. "No, just be yourself." She squinted at him. "I am myself." He almost smiled. Good. The social worker arrived at 10 the next morning. Mid-40s. Neutral expression. Clipboard in hand. Daniel answered questions calmly. Work hours. Childcare arrangements. Discipline methods. Financial stability. Chloe showed her the cardboard rocket, now reinforced with extra tape. The social worker smiled politely. At one point, Chloe climbed into his lap without hesitation, rested her head against his chest. He didn't move. The social worker noted something on her clipboard. After she left, the apartment felt hollow. Chloe looked up at him. Did I do it right? His throat tightened unexpectedly. You don't have to perform, he said softly. She frowned. I wasn't. I know. That night he sat alone at the kitchen table again. The same table where the midnight call had started everything. He didn't blame Victoria. He didn't blame himself entirely either. Life had layers, complications, human moments. But the system didn't care about nuance. His phone buzzed. A text from her. How did it go? He stared at the words. He typed back slowly. Fine. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Reappeared. If you need anything. He locked the phone before the message finished loading. He couldn't afford the comfort. Not yet. He leaned back in his chair and let the silence settle around him. The refrigerator hummed. Chloe turned in her bed down the hall. He felt the weight of choice pressing harder now. Not just whether to step back, but who he was becoming in the process. He had always believed strength meant control. Now, he wasn't sure, because control was starting to feel like distance. And distance, even for the right reasons, leaves marks. The second evaluation was at Chloe's school. He took the morning off without telling anyone why. Victoria approved the request within minutes. No comment. No question. The school hallway smelled like crayons and disinfectant. Children's artwork covered the walls, bright, uneven shapes that didn't care about symmetry. He stood outside the counselor's office with his hands in his coat pockets, listening to the low murmur of adult voices inside. When the door opened, Chloe walked out first. She saw him and smiled, small but real. Hi, she said, as if they hadn't been separated by an interview about her life. The counselor nodded at him. She's very articulate. He didn't know whether that was good or bad. On the drive home, Chloe kicked her sneakers lightly against the seat in front of her. Mom asked if I like your job, she said suddenly. His hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. What did you say? I said I don't see it. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. And that you make pancakes on Sundays. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That's accurate. She nodded, satisfied. That afternoon, he received a call from his attorney. She's pushing the angle harder, the attorney said. Implied romantic involvement with a superior. Power imbalance. Moral environment. Daniel closed his office door slowly. There's no evidence, he replied. They don't need proof. They need doubt. He leaned against the desk. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that if there is anything that could be interpreted as personal, it needs to stop. Completely. And you may need a statement from your CEO clarifying boundaries. The word statement sat heavily. Public. Document. He thanked the attorney and ended the call. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he walked down the hall toward the executive wing. Her assistant looked up. Do you have an appointment? No. A pause. I'll see if she's available. He waited, hands clasped behind his back. After a minute, the assistant nodded. You can go in. Victoria was standing by the window when he entered. She didn't turn immediately. Is it worse? She asked. Yes. She faced him then. Calm. Controlled. They want a formal statement, he said. Her eyes sharpened. For court? Yes. A silence settled between them. That makes it official, she said quietly. I know. She walked back to her desk, sat down slowly. What do you need it to say? That there is no personal relationship. No favoritism. No inappropriate contact. The words felt like stones in his mouth. She held his gaze. And is that true? He didn't answer right away. The air in the room felt thinner, It needs to be, he said. Her expression shifted subtle, but he saw it. Not anger, not hurt. Understanding. She nodded once. I'll draft it. He stayed where he was. There's more, he added. She waited. They may subpoena phone records. A flicker in her eyes. Brief. Then there's nothing to hide, she replied evenly. Technically, that was true. The midnight call had been work, the fundraiser had been business. The terrace had been conversation. But intent was harder to categorize. He stepped closer to the desk. If this affects your position, it won't, she said firmly. I won't allow it to. He believed she could weather scrutiny. He wasn't sure he could weather the emotional cost. Daniel, she said more softly, look at me. He did. We have not crossed a line. The word yet hovered unspoken. He swallowed. I know. But if you need to state that nothing exists beyond professional respect, she continued, I'll support that. The steadiness in her voice made it harder, not easier. I don't want to erase what happened, he admitted quietly. Her shoulders eased just slightly at that. But I will, he finished. For Chloe. The sentence didn't need to be spoken. Victoria stood. For a moment, he thought she might step around the desk. She didn't. Instead, she extended a document toward him already open on her screen. A draft statement. Efficient. Clear. Unemotional. He read it carefully. There was no warmth in it. No trace of terrace air or midnight pauses. Just structure. This works, he said. She nodded. He turned to leave. Daniel. He stopped at the door. This isn't weakness, she said. Protecting your daughter. He let out a slow breath. I know, but it felt like surrender. The weeks that followed blurred into preparation. Affidavits, character references, schedules documented down to the hour. He kept his head down at work, delivered results, took on extra responsibilities without complaint. Victoria maintained distance flawlessly. In meetings, she addressed him as she always had. Nothing more, nothing less. The court date arrived sooner than he expected. The courtroom was smaller than he imagined. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, no drama. His ex avoided his eyes. Her attorney spoke first, painted a picture of ambition overtaking parental focus, of a corporate environment unsuitable for a young child's stability. Daniel's attorney responded with data. Attendance records, school involvement, financial support. The statement from Victoria was submitted. Clean, clinical. The judge listened without visible reaction. When Daniel was asked to speak, he kept it simple. My daughter's life is steady, he said. I don't intend to change that. No speeches, no defenses, just fact. The ruling was reserved for later review, which meant waiting, the hardest part. That evening, Chloe sat beside him on the couch, legs tucked under her. Are you in trouble? She asked. No. Then why are you so quiet? He looked at her. Because he was tired of pretending this didn't cost something. Because choosing safety over connection felt heavier than he expected. Because he missed the terrace and hated that he did. Instead, he said, grown-up paperwork. She considered that. Paperwork is boring, she declared. He almost smiled. Yeah, he said, it is. She leaned against him again. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. And in that small living room, under the low lamplight, he understood something clearly. He would give up any possibility, any spark, any personal want, if it meant she never had to question whether she came first. Even if it meant losing something real, even if it meant losing a part of himself he had just begun to notice. He rested his chin lightly on the top of her head. The apartment was quiet, the future uncertain, but his decision at least was not. The ruling came on a Tuesday afternoon. He was in the middle of a budget review when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He ignored it. It buzzed again. He excused himself from the conference room, stepped into the hallway, and answered. His attorney didn't waste time. Petition denied. Custody remains unchanged. For a second, the words didn't settle. Denied? He repeated. Yes, the judge cited consistent stability and lack of evidence for environmental risk. Daniel leaned his shoulder against the wall. The hallway felt strangely bright. "Thank you," he said quietly. After the call ended, he stood there longer than necessary. Relief didn't arrive as a rush. It came slowly, like pressure easing from a joint he hadn't realized was locked. He walked back into the meeting room. Victoria glanced at him briefly, just long enough to ask the question without speaking it. He gave the smallest nod. Her posture shifted, barely, but he saw it. The meeting resumed. He finished his presentation without stumbling. Numbers clean, voice steady. When it ended, she dismissed everyone except him. The door closed. "Well?" she asked. Denied. The word hung between them. Her shoulders lowered. "Good." He nodded. Silence stretched. Not awkward. Just full. "You did it," she said. He shook his head slightly. "We did what was necessary." She stepped around her desk this time. Not close enough to touch. Just closer than the last few weeks allowed. "I'm proud of you," she said. The sentence caught him off guard. He wasn't used to hearing that from anyone. "It's over," he replied. "For now," she said gently. He met her eyes. "For good," he corrected. Something in her expression tightened. Not disagreement. Just awareness that life rarely promises for good. Still, she didn't argue. "Chloe," she asked. "She doesn't know details, just that things are staying the same." "And you?" He hesitated. "I'm tired." She nodded slowly. "Take tomorrow," she said. "Be with her." "I don't need." That wasn't a suggestion. He studied her for a moment. Not CEO. Not authority. Just someone who understood weight. "Okay," he said. He picked Chloe up from school early that day. She looked surprised to see him at the gate. "Did you get fired?" she asked immediately. He almost laughed. "No." "Then why are you here?" "Because I can be." She accepted that answer. They went for ice cream even though it wasn't Sunday. She chose strawberry and got it on her sleeve. He didn't mention it. On the walk home, she slipped her hand into his without looking at him. "Mom seemed mad this week," she said quietly. He exhaled slowly. Grown-ups get frustrated. "Are you frustrated?" He thought about it. "Yes," he said honestly. "With Mom? Sometimes." She nodded like that made sense. "But not with me," she added. He stopped walking. He crouched in front of her, brushing a bit of dried strawberry from her sleeve. "Never with you." She searched his face for confirmation. Satisfied, she squeezed his neck briefly before continuing down the sidewalk. That night, after she fell asleep, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of what had almost shifted. If the ruling had gone differently, he didn't finish the thought. Instead, he sat at the kitchen table again. The same place every turning point seemed to circle back to. His phone lay face down. He didn't pick it up immediately. When he did, there was a message from Victoria. "I'm glad." Simple. He stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "Thank you." He almost added more. He didn't. The next weeks felt lighter at first. Work settled. Whispers faded. People moved on to new distractions. Victoria maintained professional distance, but something had changed beneath it. The tension that had once been tight and uncertain was now quieter. Not gone, just steadier. One evening, she called. Not late. Not midnight. 6:30. He stepped onto the small balcony outside his apartment to take it. "Hi," he said. "I won't keep you," she replied. "I just wanted to say, I meant what I said." "About what?" "Being proud of you." He leaned against the railing. "You didn't have to get involved." "I chose to." The wind moved lightly through the air. Somewhere below, a car door slammed. "I kept my distance because you asked," she continued. "Not because I stopped respecting you." He knew what she didn't finish. "I know," he said. Silence. Not strained. "Where does that leave us?" she asked. He looked through the balcony glass at Chloe inside, sprawled on the floor doing homework. "Careful," he said. A small exhale from her end. That word again. "It kept my daughter with me." "It also kept you alone." He didn't answer. because she wasn't wrong. After they hung up, he stood there longer than the call lasted. Careful had protected him, but it had also narrowed him. Inside, Chloe called his name. He stepped back in immediately. "Can you help with this math?" she asked. He sat beside her. Numbers made sense. Clear solutions. Definite answers. Life didn't. And for the first time since the custody battle began, he allowed himself to consider something he had pushed aside. What if protecting Chloe didn't require eliminating everything else? What if stability and connection weren't opposites? The thought felt unfamiliar. Not reckless. Just open. He didn't act on it, not yet. But it stayed with him, quiet, persistent. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a moment where he woke up different. It was smaller than that. A Tuesday morning when Victoria asked for his opinion in front of the board and held his gaze a second longer than necessary. A Thursday afternoon when he stayed late to finalize a contract and found her in the break room heating soup from a plain container instead of attending some executive dinner. They stood there in the quiet hum of the microwave. "You skipped the Harrington dinner," he said. "So did you," she replied. "I wasn't invited." A corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile. "I was," she said. "I chose not to go." The microwave beeped. She didn't take the soup out immediately. "Does it still feel dangerous?" she asked. He knew what she meant. "Yes," he answered. And he watched the steam fog the inside of the microwave door. And not as much as before. That was the truth. The custody ruling had shifted something. Not just legally, internally. He no longer felt like one misstep would collapse everything. He had stood in a courtroom and been measured. He had not broken. Victoria leaned back against the counter. "I don't want to be a liability in your life," she said quietly. "You're not. That's not what your ex argued." "My ex argues for leverage." She studied him. "Then answer this honestly," she said. "If we move forward, does it threaten what you built with Chloe?" He didn't respond immediately. He thought about mornings, pancakes, school pickups, the cardboard rocket still sitting crooked in the corner. He thought about the terrace, the recognition. "It threatens if it's hidden," he said finally. She straightened slightly. "So we don't hide." He met her eyes. "It would have to be slow," he said. "It would. And separate from work." "Of course. And if at any point Chloe is uncomfortable?" "We stop," she finished. The word didn't feel as sharp this time. It felt responsible. The microwave beeped again, forgotten. She pulled the container out, set it on the counter, but didn't eat. "Dinner," she said after a moment. He frowned slightly. "Public," she added. "Normal. No secrecy." He felt the old instinct rise caution. Retreat. But it didn't dominate. "Let me think," he said. "Think," she agreed. That evening, he told Chloe he might have dinner with someone from work. "A man or a lady?" she asked. "A lady." She considered that. "Is she mean?" "No." "Is she loud?" He almost smiled. "No." "Does she know how to play you-know?" "I don't know." Chloe nodded thoughtfully. "Okay. That's it?" he asked. She shrugged. "You can have friends." The simplicity of it unsettled him. "You're sure?" he pressed. She rolled her eyes in a way that looked too old for her age. "I'm not a baby." He exhaled slowly. The dinner was 3 nights later. A small restaurant across town. No company crowd, no donors. Just quiet tables and soft lighting that didn't try too hard. He arrived first. When she walked in, she wasn't dressed like a CEO. No sharp suit. Just a dark sweater and simple earrings. She looked lighter. They sat. Ordered food. Talked. Not about quarterly reports or restructuring. About childhood cities. About mistakes made early in their careers. About the cost of leadership. At one point she asked, "What scared you most in court?" He didn't answer immediately. "Not losing," he said finally. "Not being believed." She nodded. "I've had rooms like that," she said. "Full of people waiting to see if I falter." "You didn't. Neither did you." There was no rush in the conversation, no performance. When the check came, neither of them reached for it immediately. He paid. Outside, the air was cool. They stood on the sidewalk a moment longer than necessary. "This feels different," she said. "It is. Because it's not hidden?" "Yes." A pause. She stepped closer. Not impulsive, not urgent. He felt her hand brush against his. This time, not accidental. He didn't pull away. He also didn't rush forward. They stood there like that for several seconds, balanced. When he got home, Chloe was already asleep. He stood in her doorway again. That had become his measure of everything. She stirred slightly, then settled. He felt steady, not divided. The following weeks required adjustment. They informed HR formally, established reporting modifications, created professional boundaries on paper. Some colleagues reacted predictably, raised eyebrows. Speculation. But this time, he didn't feel cornered. If anything, transparency reduced the whispering. Victoria handled it with the same composure she handled board negotiations. Direct, unapologetic. At home, Chloe met her 2 weeks later. Casual. Ice cream again. Victoria didn't try too hard. She asked Chloe about school, listened, played Uno, and lost without complaint. Chloe watched her carefully. Later that night, after Victoria left, Chloe said, "She's not loud." "No," he agreed. "She looks at you a lot." He paused. "How?" "Like you're important." The observation landed deeper than expected. He sat on the edge of Chloe's bed. "And how does that make you feel?" Chloe shrugged. "Okay." He nodded. That word "okay" felt bigger than the courtroom ruling, because this was the real test. Not judges, not lawyers. Trust. He lay awake that night thinking about how close he had come to cutting this off entirely. How fear had almost convinced him that love and responsibility couldn't coexist. He realized something uncomfortable. Avoiding risk had protected him for years, but it had also kept him smaller than he needed to be. Now, as he moved carefully but forward, he felt the difference. Not reckless, not naive, just willing. And that willingness changed him more than the custody battle ever had. The first time Chloe reached for Victoria's hand on her own, it wasn't during something big. No holidays, no school events, just a Saturday at the grocery store. Daniel was comparing prices on cereal, half listening to Chloe debate chocolate versus plain, when he noticed a shift. Chloe had drifted closer to Victoria without thinking, their shoulders almost touching. Then, as they walked toward the produce section, Chloe's fingers slid into hers. Natural. Unplanned. Victoria didn't react outwardly. She didn't squeeze too tightly or look down for approval. She just adjusted her pace to match Chloe's shorter steps. Daniel stood there for a second longer than necessary. It shouldn't have felt monumental, but it did. Because trust is quiet when it forms. Later that evening, after Chloe fell asleep, he stood in the kitchen while Victoria rinsed dishes beside him. "You don't have to help," he said. "I know." She handed him a plate to dry. The apartment felt smaller with 2 adults moving around in it, but not crowded. Different. "You were watching us," she said without looking at him. "Yes." Concerned? Evaluating. That made her smile slightly. "And?" He dried the plate carefully before answering. She didn't hesitate. Victoria set the sponge down. "I won't replace her mother," she said. "I'm not asking you to. I won't compete with her." "I know." Silence settled, but it wasn't heavy. "I just don't want to confuse her," he added. "You won't," she said. "You're too careful for that." There was that word again. Careful. He leaned against the counter. Careful. Keem leaned against the counter. "Careful kept me safe," he said. "And now—" He looked at her. "Now I'm trying to learn balance." She stepped closer, not touching yet. "That's harder than control," she said. "Yes." She rested her hand lightly against his chest then, not dramatic, just present. "I'm not here to destabilize your life," she said quietly. "I know. And I'm not fragile. I know that too." He covered her hand with his. It felt steady. Months passed without explosion. Work adjusted to the new structure. There were occasional looks, a few offhand comments, but nothing that threatened his position. Victoria proved publicly and consistently that professionalism didn't dissolve under personal connection. At home, routine shifted gradually. Victoria didn't move in immediately. They didn't rush. She joined for dinners twice a week, then 3. She attended Chloe's school play, sat in the second row, not the first. When Chloe forgot a line and froze under the stage lights, Daniel felt his stomach drop. It was Victoria who started clapping softly first. Not loudly, just enough. Chloe found the line again. Afterward, in the car, Chloe said, "I didn't cry." "You didn't?" Daniel agreed. Victoria glanced back from the passenger seat. "You handled it." Chloe smiled to herself. That night, Daniel lay awake longer than usual. He realized something had shifted inside him. The constant edge of vigilance had dulled, not disappeared, just softened. He still reviewed contracts carefully, still checked Chloe's homework twice, still locked the door at night. But he wasn't bracing for collapse anymore. He had allowed someone else into the structure of his life, and it hadn't fallen apart. The proposal wasn't grand, no rooftop, no audience, just a quiet evening after Chloe had gone to a sleepover at a friend's house. They were sitting on the couch, talking about nothing urgent. He had the ring in his pocket for 2 weeks before he found the right moment. Or maybe he just stopped waiting for a perfect one. "I used to think stability meant limiting variables," he said. She turned slightly toward him. "And now? I think it means choosing the right ones." He pulled the small box from his pocket. Her breath caught not loudly, but enough. "This doesn't change who comes first," he said carefully. "I would never ask it to." He opened the box. The ring was simple. "I don't want drama," he said. "I don't want spectacle. I just want this to be official, steady." Her eyes held his. "Yes," she said. No tears, no raised voices. Just yes. When Chloe found out, she crossed her arms. "Does this mean she's staying forever?" she asked. "If you're okay with that," Daniel replied. Chloe studied Victoria. "You still play Uno?" she asked. "Yes." "And you still lose?" Victoria nodded. Chloe considered for a moment. "Okay then." That was her version of approval. The wedding was small. No headlines, no corporate display. A quiet ceremony in a garden. Chloe walked beside Daniel down the short aisle, holding his hand tightly. Victoria met them at the front, composed but softer than he had ever seen her. When he said his vows, he didn't promise grand things. Just consistency, respect, partnership. The word partnership meant more to him than romance ever had. Afterward, as guests mingled, Chloe tugged at his sleeve. "You look different," she said. "How?" "Less thinking." He crouched down to her level. "That good?" She nodded. "Yes." Marriage didn't transform him overnight. There was no sudden ease, no dramatic shift in personality. The sink still filled with dishes if no one washed them. Chloe still left shoes in the hallway. Victoria still worked late some evenings, laptop open at the dining table, glasses low on her nose as she reviewed contracts. Life stayed ordinary. But the ordinary felt fuller. Victoria moved into the apartment at first. Temporarily, they told themselves. It was easier for Chloe's school year. Less disruption. 3 people in a space built for 2 required negotiation. Closet space, bathroom schedules, silence versus background music. Daniel noticed the small frictions immediately. The way Victoria preferred her coffee stronger. The way Chloe resisted sharing her bookshelf. He watched for cracks. Instead, he saw adjustment. Victoria labeled a section of the bookshelf shared. Chloe protested once, then rearranged it herself. One evening, Daniel came home to find them both on the living room floor, papers spread everywhere. "What happened?" he asked. "We're designing the rocket again," Chloe said. "A better one." Victoria looked up at him. There was tape stuck to her sleeve. "It needs structural support," she said. He stood there for a moment, briefcase still in his hand. The old rocket had leaned for months in the corner. He had left it that way on purpose. Proof of effort. Now it was dismantled, reimagined. He set the briefcase down and joined them. They argued about window placement. Chloe insisted on glitter. Victoria objected. Daniel mediated. The new rocket stood straighter. Not perfect, but stronger. The symbolism wasn't subtle. He didn't mention it. Months later, they moved to a larger house closer to Chloe's school. The day they signed the papers, Daniel felt the familiar tightness in his chest. Big changes used to mean instability. Now they meant expansion. On the first night in the new house, Chloe ran from room to room, claiming corners. Victoria stood beside him in the empty kitchen. "Are you thinking?" she asked. "Yes." "Too much?" He shook his head. "No, just taking it in." She slipped her hand into his. No hesitation. He squeezed back. The custody battle never resurfaced. His ex remarried, moved cities. Their communication became logistical rather than adversarial. Time dulled sharp edges. At work, Daniel continued to rise, but not because of his marriage. If anything, scrutiny had made him sharper. Victoria maintained her position without apology. They were careful in meetings, transparent in decisions. Professional lines stayed intact. At home, they weren't lines. They were routines. Sunday pancakes expanded to 3 plates. Chloe grew taller. Her questions grew more complex. One night, when she was 10, she asked, "Did you almost not marry her?" Daniel looked up from the sink. "Why would you ask that?" "You think a lot," she said. Victoria, at the table grading something Chloe had written, went still. He dried his hands slowly. "Yes," he answered. Chloe frowned. "Why?" "Because I was afraid." "Of her?" "No." "Then what?" He glanced at Victoria, then back at Chloe. "Of losing what mattered most." Chloe tilted her head. "You didn't," she said simply. "No," he agreed. He hadn't, but he had almost lost himself trying to prevent it. Later that night, lying beside Victoria, he stared at the ceiling the way he used to in the apartment, only now the ceiling was higher. The room quieter. "You're somewhere else," she murmured. "Just remembering." "Regret." He thought about the kitchen table, the midnight call, the courtroom, the stairwell. "No," he said. "Then what?" He turned toward her. "Gratitude," he answered. "Not for drama, not for survival, for growth." He used to believe love was a threat to structure, something that destabilized carefully built systems. Now he understood it differently. Love, when chosen with discipline, could reinforce structure. It required boundaries, transparency, patience. It required humility. He had learned that strength wasn't just control, it was trust. Trust in his role as a father, trust in her integrity, trust that Chloe's world could widen without breaking. Years later, when Chloe left for college, the house felt too quiet again. Daniel stood in her empty room, hands in his pockets. Victoria joined him. "You did well," she said softly. He shook his head slightly. "We did." He remembered the night he almost chose distance over possibility, the way fear had dressed itself as responsibility. If he had listened only to fear, this room would hold fewer memories, fewer shared meals, fewer repaired rockets, fewer quiet evenings that meant more than any public success. He had protected his daughter, but he had also allowed her to see him choose love carefully, not recklessly. That mattered. He turned off the bedroom light and closed the door. Downstairs, Victoria waited. The house was quieter now, but not empty. He slipped his hand into hers as they walked toward the kitchen. Steady. Not because life stopped being complicated, but because he stopped confusing caution with isolation. And that change, quiet, gradual, earned, was the real thing that stayed with him.